Hello, everyone. I am Peter Freer. I am the founder and CEO of Play Attention, and I am delighted to be here with you. We're going to be talking about anxiety and the brain. I'd like to give you a little bit of background about me, since I'm just this kind of floating figure in the presentation. I founded Play Attention way back in 1994. And my background is actually education. I have a master's degree in education, and I'm not your ordinary school teacher, though. I had a specialty in math, science, physics, computer science, and computer programming. And when I encountered children and adults that I was teaching who had attention problems, I decided I would create a program that would fix it. And, years later, we're working 3 jobs, 6 days a week. There's Play Attention in 1994. And that's why we're all here today. I have been featured in Time Magazine. I've been on Good Morning America. I've been featured in Investors Business Daily. I've lectured at the United Nations and also at NASA for the National Space Society. So I am a pioneer in the field of neurotechnology. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And right now I'm working with the auto industry to put headrests in cars that actually will read the brain of the driver. So it can tell you when you're too tired to be driving, you're texting and driving, which is not good. That kind of thing. So a lot of great things. That's my background. Today, though, when we're talking about anxiety in the brain, I would like to treat it like a fireside chat, right? So during the presentation, if you want to type in questions, feel free to do so. I probably won't get to them till the very end, but there will be questions that will arise, and have no problem typing them in. I'll address them for everyone at the end. And your comments may help someone else who's here for this presentation as well. So, or if you have questions that you think I might be able to help you with, I'd be delighted to do so. All right. So let's begin and take a look at this process of anxiety in the brain. When we realize that children of any age, do have anxiety and fears from time to time, it's a normal process of maturing and brain development. It happens, right? But when we realize that it's nothing that we as parents can see, I can't see their anxiety. I know when it's happening and it manifests physically, but since it's a process of thought, the way the brain is thinking and performing internally, we call it an internalized or an internalizing disorder. Now, it isn't a disorder initially. Anxiety, so we need to know this, right? Anxiety occurs in normal development. It becomes a disorder typically due to length of time that it occurs in that particular person. If the anxiety persists like a dog gnawing on a bone, and the brain won't let it go, and it persists and persists, then it's typically labeled by the medical community as a disorder. But we have to understand basically, though, that we all experience it. Some of you here probably have experienced it, and have experienced it tremendously. As a matter of fact, let's just get a show of hands. How many people here, actually, you could do a raise hand, if you've experienced tremendous anxiety due to the pandemic, if you're a child or children or your spouse, your better half, have experienced great anxiety. Hands raised. Let me see the number of participants. Wow. Okay. That's well toward 60, 65% of us here have experienced it, especially with the pandemic. I mean, that is obvious that it's a huge influence. But let's see what it's done to to the kids in our population as well. So normally between 7 to 12, around 12% of children experience anxiety. That's just normally growing up in our culture and society. About 33% of adolescents have experienced it in the past. We're in entirely new territory at this point. So what does it look like now with pandemic conditions and our worlds being flipped upside down? So during the pandemic, depression and anxiety rates, according to the CDC, were at 25.2%. That is over double what they have been in the past. It has doubled the rates of depression and anxiety for children and for adolescents as well. And I can guarantee you, for all of us here, we're experiencing the same thing. We all have incredible amounts of anxiety about the future of what's happening and what's going to happen. Of course, that's where anxiety really occurs, in that thought process of what's happening, what's going to happen. We'll discuss that in greater detail, but it's interesting to note the statistical differences of 12% jumping up to more than double to 25%, because this little fellow here is wearing a mask, never had to wear one before. What is this mysterious bug I could catch? What is it going to do to me? I've heard that people die from it, right? I'm being homeschooled. I've never had to do that before. I don't know really how this actually works. Mom and dad don't know how it works. They're at home now too, a lot of the time. And this is all different. And mom and dad are anxious. So this compounds everything. And our worlds definitely have changed. And it's important to realize, though, that since they have changed and these rates have increased, there are ways to normalize your life. And I think that's what we need to get to in this presentation. And we will discuss that very shortly. I think one of the things that helps greatly, and that's why I'm presenting these slides, is one of the things that helps greatly is that we understand the mechanism behind this. What is actually occurring to us when this actually happens? And this is a process of evolution in the brain, right? When our ancient ancestors were living with mastodons and saber-toothed tigers, the brain had to evolve to save us. If we were going to evolve as a species, the brain had to evolve in a way that would help us survive. And it did so, right? Because you remember the brain, and this is perhaps one of the most profound things I've ever learned in studying neuroscience for the last 30 years. The brain is an organ of reduction, right? Everything that we've ever learned, everything we remember, our first kiss, our last sunset, the starry skies, everything I've ever learned at school is reduced in this folded piece of gray matter. And why it's folded is just interesting in itself. And that's a whole nother webinar in itself. But in all of this folded gray matter is our whole universe. It's how we interpret the world, how we see the world, how we think about the world. And all of these are interrelated. And when we were being chased by a mastodon or a saber-toothed tiger, the brain developed a mechanism to get us out of that predicament, to save us, so we could evolve. Because if we were eaten all the time or trampled all the time, there wouldn't be any of us here today. We had to have evolved a way to survive it. And so what happens is this special portion of the brain called the amygdala actually sends a code red alert to a little portion of the brain that's next to it called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus said, there's trouble here. We're being chased by a mastodon or a saber-toothed tiger. And we have to do something. Are we going to stand and fight, or are we going to run? And so since one of those two things is happening, the hypothalamus says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pump your body full of chemicals. So let's go down to the adrenal glands, and we are going to pump you full of adrenaline and cortisol. And that will make you stronger if you're going to stand and fight, and it'll make you run faster if you have to get the heck out of there. And it works. We experience it now. So the problem with this is that the same fight or flee mechanism that was developed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago, is the same mechanism in the brain we use for our little anxieties. We're not chased by mastodons anymore. We're not chased by saber-toothed tigers. But the same mechanism that was evolved for this is still in play, even when we experience the anxiety of a pandemic. And that's troubling, because that's a massive response to something that is not incredibly immediately life-threatening, like facing a saber-toothed tiger. So it's a massive response that can change our internal structure. And we'll talk about that a little bit right now, about how that influences and changes us, because this is important to know if you want to understand how we can augment this, how we can change it, how we can evolve out of it. So typically under normal non-pandemic conditions, we live in a stasis of stability, balance, right? And what this means, and this is a great graphic here, because when you have balance, our life flows and we feel comfortable. We don't feel anxious. We don't feel panicked. We don't feel fearful. But when this connection between mind and body, and there is an inextricable connection between mind and body, one influences the body. One influences the other, right? The old Latin saying, mens sano in corpore sano, means healthy mind, healthy body. One influences the other, all right? And when we're talking about this, when we get out of balance, things happen chemically in our bodies and then physically on the other side. So all of these connections come into place, and we have to understand this relationship, this inextricable relationship between mind and body. Because, when we have disorders, anxiety disorders particularly, they can take the shape of and manifest as many different type of anxieties, right? For example, when I first went to kindergarten, I experienced separation anxiety from my mom. I remember specifically that I cried at school at kindergarten, which I didn't understand. I cried for 3 days before I got used to it. I cried because I was fearful and anxious about leaving my mom. That was number one. The moment she left me there, I started to tear up. Then I had social anxiety. I was afraid. There are all these new kids I'd never seen before, and a new teacher. I didn't know what was happening and who they were, and was I in danger? So there is that process of the brain kicking in again, fight or flight. And it's happening to me as a child. Specifically, remember, was this just me, or did other people here experience this? Let me know I'm not alone. Did anyone here experience that when you were going to school for the very first time, if you can remember that? Wow. Okay. That's a lot of us too. All right. So this, it's growing up. This is what we do as children. This is what we learn and how we respond. So I had separation anxiety. I had fear of the people there, social anxiety. Then I had general anxiety because when I got home, I'd start thinking about what was going to happen the next day. And that made me get sick. I had a sick stomach. It manifested physically as general anxiety. And then it's slightly different to develop phobias, but phobias definitely can arise because of anxiety, right? Phobias are fears that happen, and they can pop up out of nowhere. If anyone here has experienced your child or even yourself develop a sudden fear that's irrational that you've never had before, perhaps you've become afraid of a particular dog all of a sudden out of nowhere, and it seems totally irrational, and you've never seen it before. That's a phobia that can occur because of anxiety, and it just pops up out of nowhere with no apparent connection. Obviously, they are connected, but it can pop up as well. Then some of us here probably have experienced panic disorders because our body physically responds to too much stress and anxiety, right? Your heart can feel like it's beating out of your chest. You may feel faint. You may feel dizzy. You may feel nauseated, right? It depends on how your body is responding to all the anxiety. This just keeps telling us there is this inextricable link between mind and body. And we all experience it, probably now more so than ever. This chart is really, really good because it tells you about the link. And one of the first things I want you to know about the chart and notice about the chart is that there is an arrow that flows from one to the next, right? Mind to body, body to emotions, emotions to behavior. And if this were really a full cycle that we could actually see happening to us, there should be, I hope you can see my cursor here. This should be all the way back. There should be an arrow all the way back to the mind, because this is actually a cycle. When we hit behavior, Then it cycles all the way back to the mind, and the mind starts thinking about all of this, and we go through this cycle. So it is a full loop. And all of us have experienced this at one time or the other. When the mind starts thinking negatively, I get troubled thought. I can't go to sleep without thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow. And then my thought becomes muddled at times. I go, why am I thinking about this? But I can't control it because my thought is nonstop. My decisions, I don't know whether to make those decisions because I'm making poor decisions all the time. Right. And then I worry and fret constantly. And it even affects my attention. I can't even, my spouse will come into the room and I don't even hear her, right? Because I'm so anxious, thinking about other things. Anyone here experience this at all? Yeah. And this is just because of the mechanism we just talked about. Wow. Excellent. Yeah. And then, of course, the way our mind thinks actually releases stress hormones into the body. So then I get stomach issues, right? My neck gets really tight. My shoulders get really tight. Some people actually break out on their skin, almost like the psoriasis. Or you may have a lesser rash that breaks out. I may develop a nervous tic. I could get inflammation either internally or on the surface of my skin. I feel tired all the time. I even give myself headaches, right? This is a lot of us. I'm saying this because that's a lot of us here, right? This is not just something that is, happens occasionally. When we're in the middle of a pandemic, this is happening more and more to far many more people than has ever happened before. We're faced with new stressors, right, that we've never encountered before. And that, I think, since they're novel stressors, pandemic, viruses, and then their variants, and then that flipping our whole life upside down has been incredibly stressful for all of us. But you can see that this inextricable link and the mechanism continues from body to our emotions. And here's another question. How many people here have never had a shorter temper than they've ever had before in their lives? How many people here, be honest, I won't tell your names, but how many people here have become, have a very short fuse now? That's about a third of us. All right. How many people have self-doubt, not certain about what the future is, not certain about what I'm going to do? You can raise your hand on that. That's even more of us. All right. Sadness. This is the key for all of us. Many people here just don't know what to do. And so we just get sad. How many of, just raise your hand on that one if you feel this has been you. And it may, it's probably you've been sad at other times, but how many people feel that it's happening more often due to what's happening to us? I guess we're about a third on that as well. Very good. So we get withdrawn. We don't feel like we need to be part of anything. Apathy, right? We get a certain nervousness because we don't know what the future is going to be, but our brain tries to tell us what the future is going to be. It creates that image. And typically, if we're in this loop, that image isn't good. And of course, it perpetuates even more problems. And that can even affect my physical behavior. Obviously, I can become more clumsy. I've seen that happen. I increase my drinking and my smoking. I may increase my eating, right? I definitely, personally, if I get stressed, I eat. Some people just lose their appetite. And that does happen to me. If I get really super stressed, then I don't eat. If I have moderate stress, I eat. I probably to pad my body against all the anxiety. It doesn't do it, but that's probably the reason. And then if I get super stressed, I totally lose my appetite. So all of these things affect my behavior. And of course, that goes back to the way the mind starts working. And do I get more negativity and more troubled thought? So you can see this loop, this constant loop that continues if we don't stop it. Can we stop it? If we understand the mind-body connection, can we stop it, right? Do we have to constantly live like that? And that's why we're here, to find out whether we do or do not have to live like this. We can ask ourselves, is there a way to stop this? The answer is positively yes. we can stop it. Think of the brain in this way, that we're in a car, right? And we put the gas on. We see somebody, there's something bad behind us. We pump the gas and we get away from it. When we're away from it under normal conditions, our fear subsides, our anxiety decreases, and the car just goes at a normal driving speed. And we feel pretty good about that. There's stasis, right? Stasis meaning balanced. This is what we normally like to live in. But in some cases, we get away from, pump that gas in the car to get away from whatever is troubling us. And we never seem to be able to take our foot off that gas. And that's where many of us are living today. We can't get our foot off the gas pedal, right? And so we just continue on barreling down the highway in total states of anxiousness and fear and anxiety. The part of the brain, just as the brain evolved to give us that fight or flight mechanism, as we progress through evolution, the frontal lobes of the brain, that's the part right up here, the frontal lobes right here, right? When we have a mechanism there that helps us pump the brakes, that helps us slow down and get control over this. Now, one of the reasons I tell you about the mechanism is because I think, and as I have gone through the fields of neuroscience, understanding what is the cause often helps us navigate our way through the problem. And that's why I started with talking about the mechanism. We have to feel that we're not abnormal when we do this. We have to feel that this is nothing unreasonable. It's reasonable. What we're facing, all of us together here, is normal. It's the way our brain has been conditioned to respond. But we do have a mechanism in the brain, in the frontal lobes, called executive function, which pumps the brakes to slow us down. So what the heck is executive function? Now, many of you here may already know. If you don't know, then I'm going to just discuss it briefly so that you can understand the concept of executive function. Let's say that our brain is a huge corporation. The folks in the corporation that exude the most control over the corporation are the executives. They make the decisions on where money is spent, what resources will be dispersed where, how we will disperse resources, how we'll make good decisions, how we'll regulate all of this, how we'll pay attention and focus on certain problems. And that is what happens in a corporation. But the brain is very much like that. The brain allows us to control or self-regulate through the frontal lobes, where executive function, for the most part, executive function exists in other places than the frontal lobes, but primarily we think of it in the frontal lobes as being controlled there. So putting on the brakes, yeah, there's a mechanism for that. And that is executive function. Now, executive function is a peculiar developmental process of the brain. It doesn't fully mature until about the age of 25. And if you talk to my wife, she would tell you it's probably 50 in men. Men develop more slowly than women. There's no doubt about that. And executive function and control typically don't fully form in most humans until about the age of 25. They're there, but they don't fully form until 25. But some of us get them earlier, and some of them we have strong executive function, not fully formed, but very early on for some of us. But if you have ADHD on top of it, ADHD, as our colleague Russell Barkley, who's the eminent authority on ADHD, he says it's a misnomer. I've always said ADHD is a misnomer because it's not attention deficit. They don't have a problem with attention being deficit. They have plenty of attention. It's diffused all the time. They don't have the ability to regulate attention. And that's executive function. So Dr. Barkley tends to talk about it as an executive function deficit, which is actually very well put, and it's accurate. As that in ADHD, we have problem controlling our emotions to self-regulate. Our attentional control is also compromised. And then you can imagine compounding that with anxiety and not fully forming until I'm 5. Well, then it creates quite the mess. How many people here, just as a matter of interest, are here because you have ADHD in your life? And that can be in yourself, it could be in your child or your significant other. How many people are here because of that and the fact that you have problems with anxiety right now? Hands up. Excellent. Okay, that's a lot of us here. So we need to know how this can actually happen, right? How we can actually put the brakes on and pump the brakes. And that's what we'll talk about right now, using our executive function to help regulate. Because if we don't, right, we have to understand that there is anxiety that, happens. And I've given this example right here of test anxiety and cognitive control. Right. So sometimes we think about taking the test, or your child knows they have to take a test the next day. That night, perhaps they're restless during sleep because they're anxious. There's test anxiety going on. They may wait until the test is handed to them by the teacher, and then they get anxious and their hands are sweaty. They're not thinking clearly, all those things we described before. But then we get through the test. We make it through the test. We learn to control and regulate ourselves enough to get through the test, and then we leave it behind. Test is taken. I go through the rest of my day. Anxiety is gone. That's pretty normal. However, if my anxiety perseveres, right, if it sustains and presents longer than that, and I can't for days get over taking that test and I'm still anxious, and we definitely have a problem on our hands. We have an anxiety problem. So remember, having a little anxiety in life, very normal. Having that dog gnawing on the bone, persistent carrying on of anxiety for long periods of times without being able to pump the brakes and stop, right? Slow it down and stop. Go back to stasis and balance. Then we have a problem when we are not able to do that. So some of the techniques that most of us try are not productive. Counterproductive techniques. First, if we experience anxiety, this is what almost all of us do. It's fight or flight, right? I'm either going to stand and face it, or I'm going to run away. Well, for most of us, the easiest way to manage anxiety and stress is to run away from it. The problem is that when we run away from stress and anxiety, maybe the situation, we try to run away from that. The problem is that internally, it's still there. I may leave that situation, but if I have a true problem with anxiety, it persists internally. Remember, anxiety is what we call the internalized or internalizing disorder. It starts in the brain and in thought and cognition. And if I cannot, by running away, I cannot stop that, and that mechanism of running away does not stop anxiety. It's still there. I've run away from the situation, but if I go back to that situation, I'm still anxious. So there's going to be something else. And then self-talk is another method that we often use, right? I try to coach myself out of it and say, hey, dummy, it's time to stop worrying about this. You can do it. And then you talk negatively. It's just dumb to do this. I can't stand myself because I do this. That self-talk is not productive. There are other ways to manage it and get the brain to regulate. And that's where we need to, take a peek and understand how I can internally engage my executive function so that I can decrease anxiety and improve my cognitive control. I think And as with all of us right now, I may have made you anxious by talking about all this. Anybody here anxious because of what we're talking about and understanding right now? Be honest. If you are, there's no problem in doing it. Raise your hand if you are a little bit anxious about it. Okay, there are a few of us that are, right? Because we're now coming face to face with what is troubling us, right? And how the mechanism in the brain works to continue it, to perpetuate it. So what we want to do, and all of us can do this together, is just take a few deep breaths. Remember, this is a chat. And remember to ask questions during this if you want, or at the end, and I'll do my best to answer you, or my staff will help me answer you. But remember, we're having a chat. This is not a point where you're being analyzed, you're being criticized. We're just discussing the mechanism. We're getting to understand the mechanism and how we can work on this internally ourselves in very simple ways. So I want everyone here to just take a few deep breaths with me. In through the nose, and then out through the mouth. And then let's do that again. In and out, and just relax. And let's do what is number one on this list to decrease anxiety. Let's be cognizant of what we consume with our eyes and ears. So we know that if I eat a box of jelly donuts, if I consume that box, it is not good for me, right? Maybe half a jelly donut. Of course, I like a whole jelly donut, but that's another story. But if I eat a whole box, if I'm not careful with what I consume, if I eat a lot of fatty foods, it is unhealthy for me. But you have to realize the same is true for your brain with what you're seeing and hearing. So if you have the news on all day and it's showing you death and destruction here, it's not affecting you, but it's just showing you death and destruction somewhere else. There's anxious, and you're anxious and over the fact that there's new variant out in the pandemic, and there's anxiety over that. If we immerse ourselves in this all day, we leave that news on, or every time we turn the news on, this is what we're consuming, then you're going to develop a pattern in your brain where you're constantly afraid, constantly fearful, because it's important to understand what we consume with our eyes and ears as important or more important than what we consume through our mouth. Did you catch that? Be cognizant of what you consume, right? And I've got to tell you, one of the best things to consume right now is some comedy. All right. Watch things. I don't mean to popularize or advocate the show, but there is a show called Ted Lasso. When you have so many shows that are about violence and shooting and death, and we've seen enough, we've had enough, can't take anymore. When you go to Ted Lasso, I got to tell you, it is extraordinarily funny, and it's heartwarming, and it is a show where you leave not feeling anxious. You feel good. So you can also consume shows like that. You can consume shows that teach you, that make you understand the world a little bit more, right? But if we immerse ourselves in doom and gloom, and some of us actually get into that cycle where I just have to know what's going on, what's going to be the next shoe to drop, where is the next big problem going to occur, then if we get into a cycle and we can't escape that, and then it has a very negative effect on the way we think. And we know if it's a negative way on what we think, then the body is going to follow. So number one here is just incredibly important. Start shifting to things that will enrich your mind, especially with screen time, especially things that can cause laughter and can cause you to learn and be progressive in your life. That is one of the key elements here that you can do right now. Costs you nothing. It's a matter of changing the channel. Is everybody with me? Please don't change the channel now because we're in the middle of the talk. But I'm serious about your screen time. Change your channel. Start consuming things that are positive for you. Super important. And then limit your screen time. This is very important in itself. You know, the American Academy of Pediatrics, up to the age of 2, I think right now, this is super important. Up to the age of 2 recommends 0 screen time for children, young infants, 0. I think up to the age of about 6, they suggest an hour a day of quality time. And this is super important. As an adult, we consume a lot of screen time, right? Hours. Even teens actually consume, I think they're up to like 16 hours a day of screen time. They go to bed with a screen in their hand. They go to bed chatting and falling asleep during a chat. They don't stop. The screen time affects the way the brain works. So when you use screen time, and screen time is great. I spend a lot of my day on the computer, producing things, monitoring things, developing new ideas. So I use it very positively. And if I'm not using my screen time wisely, it, again, as a fact, this is not Peter Freer just telling you this, research from countless studies has shown us that your screen time has to be quality. If you're going to do it at all, has to be quality. Be careful of what you consume, limit that screen time, and limit it to things, you know, you can have some pure entertainment, no doubt about it, but limit the screen time now and get some quality in there. Will make a huge difference for you right away. Number 3, extend your mind to someone else's needs. A lot of, many times when we are anxious, it's because we are focused, self-focused. I am focused on what is troubling me. I am focused on what is going to happen to me, or perhaps maybe my child or my spouse. I am focused on that. But pretty, you know, I'd say most of us here are probably thinking initially, this is just bothering me. I can't stand this. This is troubling me. And it's a lot of self-focus. So if you want to change your brain, start with kindness. I learned this recently as my mom passed recently. She was in a wonderful care facility at the time of her passing. Those people there are just remarkable. They helped her through it. They were wonderful to my family. But when I was there, I thought there are a lot of people who need a lot of kindness. The staff, we were fortunate enough so that the staff was incredibly kind and caring. You don't get that everywhere you go now, and most of you probably have experienced that at one point or the other. But when you direct your awareness outwardly toward other people who need kindness, or you just do random acts of kindness, then your life changes. All right. So we get away from shining a light on everything that's wrong in our lives, and we start shining our light outward in helping people. And this in itself is incredibly important. And engaging that as well actually starts changing the way your brain functions in a magnificent way. As a matter of fact, if you look up on TED Talks, you'll have many speakers addressing how kindness actually rewires the brain. And when I say rewires, I mean rewires. Just as the brain is wired, much like the inside of your house, your apartment, your home is wired to make lights turn on. The connections, the neural connections between the cells in your brain actually grow and change with kindness. Super important. Give a lot of thought to this. Organize. Costs you nothing. Right? Stay organized. Begin to get organized. Clean up. How many people here have noticed that your house is messier and you don't care? Right? Your life is in more disarray and you don't care because of the pandemic. Can I have a show of hands on that? It's funny how many of you answered so quickly. Yeah. Isn't that funny how our brain just goes, I don't care. I'm in a pandemic. I don't care. Right? But remember, when you were healthy, your brain often operated in an organized manner. The brain, one of the primary functions of the brain is to organize, is to put things in order. When you go to sleep at night, did you realize the brain is more active than it is typically in the daytime? We think, oh, the brain's resting. The brain's not resting at all. That little piece of gray matter is hard at work to organize. All right. It's hard at work to order my day, what has happened, what I've learned, what I experienced during the day. So when I organize, my brain is a happy place. Disorder in the brain is not a happy place for the brain, because the brain's one of its foundational jobs, fundamental jobs, is being in order. I hope this makes sense. All right. So personally, start to organize a bit, clean up, get your life back in order. Costs you nothing. It's easy to do. Yoga. Yoga can be life-changing, because yoga, when you do it, it's just not the kind of thing we saw back in the 70s and 80s. It's very sophisticated and fun, and it makes you coordinate your mind and body. And by doing yoga, and you can find yoga classes for free all over the internet. And guess what that refers back to? Anyone here know when I say you can go back on YouTube and find yoga exercises? Does that refer to any one of these things I just mentioned? It does, doesn't it? It refers to screen time, right? Yes. Thanks, Denise. Absolutely. It's screen time. So you can find a great class on yoga for free and do it. And it requires just a little space in your living room. And it can be life-changing to teach yourself how to coordinate mind and body. It's free. Screen time, good use of screen time. Breathing exercises, again, just like we did a few seconds ago. I've taught martial arts for many years. I've been in martial arts for 53 years. And one of the first things that you learn to do is breathe correctly. And then breathing, when you're controlling your breathing, it engages your brain to be very aware and organized, and then back to balance, stasis that we talked about before. So breathing exercises, and there are simple breathing exercises you can do. There are great videos on breathing exercise for free on YouTube. You can do, I'll suggest one to you now. Don't start any activity until you consult your physician. That's the warning I must give. But, just in this case, tongue on the roof of your mouth, and you breathe in slowly for 7 seconds, and breathe out for a slow 11 seconds. And do you remember the old 7-Elevens? I don't know if they exist anymore, but anyone here remember the 7-Eleven stores? You could, they were a quick stop. You could get your gas and a slushie at those places. Yeah, okay. There are a few of us that remembered it. All right. So think of the old 7-Elevens. 7 seconds in, 11 seconds out. And do those as you comfortably can. And again, get your mind back in order. It takes the light off of you and back to just balance and stasis. So you can find those. Mindfulness. Practice mindfulness. What the heck is mindfulness? Mindfulness is being in the moment. Mindfulness is not thinking about what happened yesterday or thinking what's going to happen tomorrow. It's being in the moment, just as I am here with you, being in the moment. Right? I'm not thinking about what bills I'm paying tomorrow, who I have to meet with, what I did yesterday, what the problems were. In the moment. That's the only way that you and I can really communicate well, is that we're both meeting here, same place, same time, being in the moment. And that's what mindfulness is. If you're listening to this presentation while you're thinking about how awful your life is or how anxious you are, then you're missing the point. That's not being mindful. Mindful means you're in the moment, you're listening, and you're coordinating, and you're becoming part of this process. This is how the brain actually changes and starts to learn. That's a whole nother webinar in itself. We can do those later, definitely. So, when I developed neurotechnology for play attention years ago, one of my primary concerns was how to get students to engage immediately, to become mindful, because mindfulness is key. As a matter of fact, I know my staff, when they did these slides, wanted me to talk about what we do and how powerful neurotechnology is. So I'll talk about that. Neurotechnology, if you think about it, when you step on your treadmill, if you've got a treadmill or an exercise bike and you grab the handlebars, within a few seconds, you can actually see your heart rate in real time. Show of hands for people that have seen that before, just a heart rate meter. Thank you. Right. That's the vast majority of us here. And we know that if I'm moving too slowly, I'm not getting enough exercise, and it shows up my heart rate. Then if I move too fast and my heart rate's going way too high, I know I slow down. So there's a feedback tool for my heart. But neurotechnology is the exact same thing, except it allows me to see what my brain is doing in real time. Right. And one of the activities I put in play attention was a mindfulness activity. And it's right here. We call it Lotus. So in play attention, we give you a little armband that allows you to control your brain in real time. Right. And with that, when you become mindful to this lotus flower, when you start the game, is closed. And so when you become mindful to the lotus, you can open that lotus petal by petal. However, when you lose your mindfulness to that petal, let's say you've got a petal opening, you're mindful, and then you go, oh, you know what? This afternoon, I have to do this. I have this meeting, and that petal will start to close. So you're in a real-time feedback loop to experience mindfulness. Is everybody with me? Because many times we try mindfulness. Many of you have heard it because it's so popular right now. Mindfulness is a great, massage treatment for the brain. It's a great way to treat your brain. Your brain actually just loves mindfulness. But the problem is, when I try to be mindful, I'll start, thinking about my breath and working on my breath. And then a couple of minutes into it, I go, oh, you know what? I have to meet them for dinner tomorrow, and I have that business meeting. And then about a minute later, I go, oh gosh, my brain has finally caught it. I'm out of mindfulness. Got to go back to mindfulness. With neurotechnology, you actually get to see your mindfulness on the screen in real time. And when you're out, you immediately correct. So what would take you years to perfect on your own is cut and down to a minuscule portion of time, because you're in command of your mind in real time. That's what neurotechnology does. And that's why I'm working with the automotive OEM OEM is manufacturers, the big car makers, so that we can put it in car headrests where you don't have to touch anything. It just is going, hey, you're doing great. You're really in the moment. Or you're getting so sleepy, here's a good time to take a coffee break. So we could save your life. So that's what we're doing with neurotech, and that's why neurotech is so powerful. That kind of formed the basis of play attention, because it improves your executive function, your ability to control and self-regulate. So you can, the way that we formed it, obviously, is you can use it anytime and anywhere, which is key. A lot of times when you see neurofeedback devices, you got these weird headset kind of things that you have to wear, and nobody wants to put those on their head. That's the problem. That's why you don't see them anywhere. You may have seen them advertised somewhere, but nobody wants to wear them. You sure wouldn't wear one to the grocery store, and you wouldn't wear one while you're driving. But neurotech can provide you that real-time feedback about your mind so that you are in control, mindful, attentive, engaged, and then you can work on other executive function skills that actually increase, right? Cognitive skills that increase your executive function so that you self-regulate better. This is the whole reason I did invent Play Attention, because it is such a powerful tool, neurotechnology is. But I also realized very early on that ADHD was not just a matter of attention. It's not. Attention is a minor element. The real problem is executive function. And when we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the fact that we are in a state where we're not mindful, we're not regulating, self-regulating, we're not organized, and this creates that cycle. So using neurotech can help you stay in the state longer and shortens your learning curve drastically to do it. Play Attention by itself directly affects and teaches. This is what we do in Play Attention as a sidebar. This is the little device I was talking about in Play Attention. Wear it on your arm and allow you to control things on the screen by mind alone. And then the games in Play Attention each teach executive control, right? Executive function and cognitive control. You see there are 12 different ones, whether it's social skills or working memory or just attention stamina or motor skills or auditory processing. How many people here, just out of curiosity, you can look at your ADHD child and say, I need you to go to your bedroom, put your pajamas on, brush your teeth, and get ready for bed. And then you go up to that bedroom an hour later, and they made it to the bedroom. They processed that. And they're sitting on the edge of the bed playing a Game Boy or talking on their cell phone. They never processed anything past, go to your bedroom. All right. Wow. That's, yeah, again, that's a large portion of us here that are raising our hand. And that's auditory processing. And that's a process of executive function. Can I take this stream of data and process it? Part of executive function. So it doesn't come naturally, and it's weaker in ADHD kids. And of course, that leads to increased anxiety at times. Of course, with the pandemic, it's greatly increased. This is something really cool. We're about to finish up. This is something really cool that we're doing as well. Many of you are not certain how to do some of this that we're talking about. In Play Attention, we are actually starting with real-time certified Play Attention professionals who will work with your child at home. You could do it as a program at home with a real live Play Attention certified provider as well. This is pretty cool because, you know, a lot of us are nervous about doing it ourselves or doing it with our children. We can do that. We'll decrease your anxiety on that one. How's that? All right. If you would like to get these slides, by the way, we've recorded this, and so it will be posted as a link on the website so that you can access it as you wish. We'll send you that link. If you would like to explore using neurotechnology and using Play Attention to help, just type your phone number in the chat box and someone will call you. You can do that now. So if you would like more information and want someone to call you, put your telephone number in, they'll call you. If you'd like to get started with Play Attention, by the way, you can do your first session, that online session, the real online session where you can see each other just like this and have a real learning program done by a professional. You can get your first one off at half price. You can get a consultation. So if you want your consultation, just type in consultation, right? And they'll talk to you about what it is and everything that you need to know. If you want an assessment to determine where you or your student or your child lies as far as a focus assessment, where we look at attention on a scale so we can ascertain where that is, then you can also do that. If you want to do one that an assessment that monitors executive function, then you can register for a brief assessment, so we can look at where your executive function lies along a scale that is really accurate. It's used highly in the industry. So type in assessment if you would like an assessment. And then we have another webinar coming up here on the 8 daily habits to improve executive function and self-regulation. And that is coming up. You can register on the site for that, or if you want to register now, just put register me or just register for a webinar, and they'll connect with you and get you signed up for the webinar. Now, if there are questions, I'm going to pull up the chat. So if there are questions in here, I can answer. So let me go back up to the top of this list. All right. Carla, isn't it pumping the brakes a great metaphor? Thank you for that. It is pumping the brakes. I don't know where we heard that. Somewhere along the line, somebody else probably said it, but it's a great way to think about it. That executive function is a great way to pump the brakes on anxiety, to control and regulate the brain. Thank you. Cognizant. Sergey wants to know cognizant. Cognizant means that I am aware of what I'm thinking. I'm cognizant. All right. And here's how it's used, Sergey, in a sentence. I am cognizant of the fact that Sergey does not understand the word cognizant. I am aware of the fact and understand that Sergey doesn't know what the word cognizant means. I hope that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't, and I'll try to do better. Carla loves Ted Lasso. I'm assuming that's it. It is one of the most fabulous shows on TV. They won all kinds of Emmys because it is wonderful. You would almost everyone here, very good for the heart, very good for the soul. Will we be getting a copy of the slides? Serena wants to know, how does one access the recording? Yes, you'll be getting a link to this video, so you'll have it for your access later. Let's see. Giannina, what a beautiful name too. Left my job of 13 years. Yeah, it's these are unprecedented times. Can totally understand. It is the time of great resignation. So, how to adjust. That is one of the results. If we can't adjust, we leave, right? Remember, that's not necessarily the best method, right? Running away or departing is not necessarily the best. We have to, at times, come to grips internally, pump the brakes and go, I can handle this. Here's how I manage it. I really appreciate everyone's candor here. Let's see. Is the Lotus app part of the basic package? Kathy wants to know. It is not. It's an extra. It's an add-on. You can just put in Lotus if you want. Someone will call you and tell you how you can get Lotus in your package. Let's see. My daughter uses Play Attention, Kristen says, but I'm interested in knowing the pricing for online coaching sessions. Can they be bought a la carte? They can be bought a la carte. Kirsten. They can be bought a la carte, and I think they are $40 for the lesson. So absolutely, and it's a great value because you're with a professional who is, a certified Play Attention provider to help you out with that. And you can, if you want to do it one time and see if it's really good for you, do it one time. But they are really good. We developed the whole technique years ago of being able to do Zoom, except with neurotech being shown to us in real time while your student is working with you. All right. Okay, Denise, Gwen will be in touch with you as you requested. Register for the 8 hours. Okay. The live sessions are available for both children and adults. So if you're an adult that wants to, you have to have a Play Attention system first, right? So we can work with you on play attention. But those are not only for children, they're also for adults as well. All right, I'm scanning down really quickly. All right, I already received a good explanation. Okay, Sergey. All right, and am I pronouncing your name right? Just let me know on that too. Maya says, what is your opinion about taking medication as a shortcut? That's a good question. I am not opposed to medication. I just think we overuse them here in the States. We've got a pill for everything. Per my doctor's recommendation, I take a baby aspirin because heart problems that have run in my family in the past. So I think that's appropriate. Will that cure my heart condition? No. Is it a preventative measure? Yes. Medications to stop anxiety may halt them temporarily, but remember, you're changing brain chemistry. And when you do that, anxiety is still there, right? It's masking the symptoms. If you go off the medicine, it's still there. So it might be a good way for you to slide into a way to get organized, to get mindful, to go through some of those steps that I talked about. So, you have to think about it deeply with your healthcare provider, and hopefully you've got a good one who will take the time to talk to you about it, and then to take the time to make those changes in life. I'll give you one. I know we're about out of time here, but I did want to give you one good example about the medical profession. My wife was on the computer all day, and she got carpal tunnel syndrome. And I had my knee operated on because of martial arts and torn cartilage. And so I said, well, go to my orthopedic surgeon. He might be able to help you. So she sees him, and he comes in, he's in a rush. And he says, so I hear you think you have carpal tunnel. Can I see your hand? And then he felt on her wrist, and he said, does that hurt? And she goes, yes. He said, well, that's carpal tunnel. So here's what we're going to do. Do you mind if I mark on you? So he took a magic marker and marked down and said, I'm going to cut there. We're going to clean back the sheath on that nerve, and that should fix everything. And my wife said, well, I don't really want to be cut. Is there an exercise you can give me? Is there something I can do to fix it? He goes, no, that's what we do. I'm a surgeon. I cut, and we're going to do surgery. She goes, well, I really don't want that. He said, well, do you want a shot? I can give you some steroids, and that should alleviate some of it for now. She goes, no, isn't there something I can do? He said, no. And then he starts to walk out the door, and he turns around and goes, I'm here for you. Now, this took about 2 or 3 minutes tops. And she just chuckled and left. And she saw a friend of mine who is a sports massage therapist. And she said, is there anything I can do, or do I have to have surgery? He said, no, I can fix this. I've fixed this on many people. So in 3 sessions, first session, she had no more pain in any of her wrist or arm and had tingling in her fingertips. Second session, she had no more pain, and he gave her exercises to do with her wrist and her arm and take massage on occasion. She's never had it recur again. So yes, it can be used, but there are ways that we can figure out things that will work for us if we explore a little bit sometimes, right? All right. I can see, perfect. My students love Lotus. It's very effective. Kathy says, Lotus is very effective in helping awareness in a calm state. Lisa said, tips for staying organized. Yeah, Lisa's really insightful here. She goes, you got tips for staying organized, getting organized? That's a whole nother webinar in itself. And if you're interested in that, type the word organize in, and we'll run a webinar on how to do it, some of the tips and strategies for doing it. Kathy says, I include exercise as one of the tools for managing stress. Perfect. Yoga is great exercise for that, but any exercise that you're getting, whether it's walking, hitting a punching bag, something like that. All right. Video link will be sent in email later today or tomorrow after it gets edited a little bit and takes off the front end where it sees me scratching my head and trying to figure out how to use Zoom. Does the Play Attention staff help one build a business? Denise, yeah, you can actually get help from the Play Attention staff to actually start a Play Attention center or a business at home, that kind of thing. Absolutely can. If you want to, just type in business and someone will contact you about that. Lisa said, this is a good question. How do I insulate against all that anxiety of all those around me? And that's the tough question, because, can you affect them enough to stop in trying to influence you? And the chances of that are nil, right? You can't change them, but you do have to change yourself. When you start changing yourself and start doing those steps that I discussed, you'll be surprised how much that affects everyone around you. And they're going to be looking to you like, what are you doing? You're just so upbeat. You're calm in the face of disaster, in the face of fear. And you go, here's what I'm doing. And you will influence them. And I'm not kidding. I mean, that's the truth. I actually experience that all the time. So that's a significant question. Or they are just rolling in. I can't, Giannina, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I can't recommend any medications at all. I'm not a medical doctor. Always discuss medical problems with your physician. And Kira says, we use medication as a tool to help us breach barriers and assist us in building new habits and techniques, which is the best way to do it. You think of it as a Band-Aid you put on, and when you're healed up, you take it off. It's that simple. You can use it as a tool. That's a smart way to think about it. All right, I'm trying to get through everyone so I don't miss anyone, but I think I'm almost there. Denise, to answer your question on anxiety with bipolar, if you put in a consultation, then we'll have someone talk to you about that as well, because it's way too complex a question for me just to spend a little time. It deserves a lot more time. Okay, we have an ebook on organization that we'll send as well. If you want that ebook on organization, just type in organization ebook and we'll send that to you. Okay. All right. I think I got it. All right. Wow. Those organization ebooks are, yeah. All right. Keep them coming. I'll stay on while you're typing those in. I appreciate all of you being here. I really do. It's an astounding thing to be able to get together and be able to share and be on these webinars together. It's just a technology and using screen time wisely. All very good things. Thank you so much. Again, I am Peter Freer. I am the founder and CEO of Play Attention, and I have had a great time. So thank you so much for spending time. And let's do this again. We'll have another webinar soon. Tune in and let us know if we can help you with Play Attention.